Falls on three other members of the Count Basie aggregation: Paul Quintachet, Jimmy Wilkins, Marshall Royal, Count York,
So,
and a little
so for those of
Basie
you
Dick.
who were paying attention, who were in a little early, my voice is live. So, oh, all of the tech things. All of the tech things are hilarious. So, if your thing is authenticity and you're like, yeah, I don't like a lot of, staged, super polished stuff, boy, do we have a show for you. For those of you who are in a little early, we're fussing around with the settings and checking with the seeds and stuff and then switching things. So you got an inside look at the behind the scenes of the producer's office. So we're just a couple of guys learning how the tech works and learning how all this stuff works and, trying to do a thing. So, I was thinking last night. I was thinking about yesterday's show, and I remember I had a friend when I don't know. I'd been the place I'm at where I'm pastoring is I'd been there for 5-6 months, and they found out I was pastoring there, and they came by just to say hi, and we were going to catch up about some things. Like, oh, well, why don't I just come to church and we'll talk after and stuff. It was great, and they showed up, and they're just awesome. And Rob, you know who this is. And so they sat through the service, and we're doing not what would be a typical service. We're doing formation around the vision. So it's a little bit more technical kind of stuff. But I get to the end of this message, and the comment they said was, I forgot how smart you are. And I'm like, well, thank you. But if, and I'm thinking in the back of my head, if you walked away thinking I'm smart, then probably you walked away mentally exhausted. And that wasn't my goal. I didn't want you to think I was smart. I wanted people to understand what we were doing. Sometimes, so here's the real barrier in a lot of the things that we do. In the Christian faith, there are scholars and there are people who do all this research. And so you're always engaged in all of this work that was written 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago. And so because you're engaged in all this work from this great span of time, there's a certain vocabulary that comes with it. And so things that are really not that complicated, they get industry terms associated with them. It's funny that I can't think of one off the top of my head, but sanctification, or various terms like this. And then they become more complicated, not because it's a complicated thing, but just because, it's insider speech. So if you've ever watched, and I think the United Football League is on or something right now. And I'm a big football fan, so it doesn't matter how bad the football is. If it's on TV, I'll probably watch it. If it's Friday Night High School Kids, I'm watching it. If it's like the worst of the Friday Night High School Kids, I'm still watching it. But the cool thing about the UFL is they have mics in the huddle and the coach's mic. And so you hear them call the plays. And it's complete gibberish. Like, you're listening to that, you're like, it's alien speak. It's Greek to me, kind of the phrase. X, Y, shallow, zig, Hank, nasty, Omaha, and you're like, what did you just say? And that's oftentimes what happens when we communicate about the Bible is we're insiders with our own Bible. We're insiders with theology and scripture and stuff. And sometimes it feels really nice. I know a lot of stuff and I'm hanging out with the scholars and look at me, but that's our pride. And what we need to do is realize those are just tools to get at the easy yoke and the light burden that Jesus gave us. So I want to go over today a little bit. We're going to jump back around on a couple of the things that we talked about yesterday, and I'm going to fill in some data that I think maybe I left out. And again, we're just two dudes trying to figure this out. So we missed a bunch of chat yesterday. So please keep chatting, and we're going to try and take those, at the end of the segments, each segment in the show, and at the end of the show. Love that. And disagreement and all that stuff is awesome, because conflict isn't our problem. It's how we handle conflict, right? That's a general principle around here. It's like, yeah, disagree, but let's lean into the discussion and try and lean into this transformational process together. So we're going to kind of clear up some passages. And after the show yesterday, someone sent me a great example that we missed. And Rob, you're going to love this. I'm going to pull up in the verses. This is, where am I? This is Philippians 3:15. And this is my new favorite verse to quote out of context. All of us then who are mature should take such a view of things. And if on some point you think differently, that too God will make clear to you. So my friend called me up with that verse yesterday, and I'm like, that is just perfect, right? So anytime someone disagrees with me, I'm going to be like, well, all of us who are mature, but God's going to sort that out for you. So hang tight. No, that is not the context of that verse, and that's not what that verse means. Go back and read the full passage. Remember, we want to zoom out to zoom in. All right, and I'm going to let Rob have the controls back here. I'm messing with his system here this morning. So look, that's what we're going to do, and we're going to clear up a couple passages. We're going to look at a good example of what it looks like to listen with humility, and what it looks like to hear people and to not have to be defensive, to just let what you're doing speak for itself, and to just give an account for what you're doing in a reasonable and rational way without needing to win or be defensive, and letting God's light shine through us and kind of getting out of the way. Now, the example we're going to look at, I have no idea what these people believe about God and the universe, but it is a great example of humility. And anytime we see something good that looks a little bit like Jesus, we're going to say, hey, that's, we're all made in the imago Dei, in the image of God. And so anywhere we look around and we see a good thing, James reminds us that every good and perfect gift comes from God. And so everything we see that is good in the universe traces back to God somehow, even if it comes through someone who is not a believer. God is still responsible for the good in our world. So we're going to look at that, and I think that's what we've got. And we're going to do what we do every day, which is try and take another step together towards following after Jesus. Take it away, Chuck.
And being willing to be less than the least became the greatest of all. Let us imitate him who was King of Kings and yet a servant of servants.
The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave.
Would you turn on my microphone, please?
It's right here in the hall closet.
All right. So, yeah, and if you hear me talking back, I've got an excellent producer in my ear, so I'm not talking to myself. I promise. There really is two of us. If you were on early, you saw I'm not doing this by myself. So quick, I want to go. It's just in my head. Okay. Yeah. Well, then it can tell me if it's my voice, and if it's in my head, then shouldn't it tell me all the things I want it to say? And this is the problem. The Spirit does speak to us, but oftentimes we're speaking to us pretty loud too, and sometimes we're shouting louder than God, and so oftentimes when we say, "Well, I'm just following the Spirit," we always have to double check that against what the Bible says, right? So these inner voices. And if you have many inner voices, no, we all have inner voices. We all have, we all kind of have an inner monologue going, and it's the story of us and how awesome we are. And what is a difficult discipline in the Christian life is learning how to let go of that monologue and let that be the narrative of Jesus playing out through us, which looks like our transformation and redemption through his power. And so I think when we look at our example later on in the show, you're going to see a really good example of someone they're just really secure in what they're doing, and they just kind of don't care. Like in a good way, not in an apathetic way. They care, but they're not really in it for their ego, and that's fascinating. When we see that, that's a wonderful thing. So, quick thing on the Hebrew grammar here, real quick. And I want to go back on this point because we had someone chat in a great point, and I want to make sure it gets on the show. And thank you for chatting this in. When we said that all caps in your Bible is the divine name, there are no caps or lowercase in Hebrew. It's kind of like kanji or Japanese. It's a language with symbols like that. So there isn't really a capital or a lowercase because doesn't have the same kind of alphabet. But this article is from Logos, called "What is God's Name?" and you can find this anywhere. A bunch of different publishers have produced articles like this, and here is what that looks like. Right, these little Hebrew words, and you read them from right to left. For us, we would read, YHWH, and then we would put in the vowels, Yahweh. And so for the ancient Israelites, they wouldn't want to say the name of God, and so they would say Adonai or Lord. And that, incidentally, is likely where we get Jehovah is a combination of the divine name and Adonai, Yahovah. But that's a whole different story. Again, you can find some good explanations of that on the interwebs. The point is that, we're talking about Hebrew script translated into English and the way they represent it in the English to delineate between someone who is a lord, like the lord of the manor, a human, or someone who is, or God when he functions in the role of Lord as Adonai, versus the divine name, is the divine name will be in English represented in lowercase caps, Lord. Capital L, lowercase capital O-R-D, right? And so it'll kind of stand out in the script. And that's just letting you know that's the divine name. And so they're carrying over some of the respect of not saying the divine name. And I'm not, superstitious about it, but I do think, some respect for the name of God is due to the follower. And so we shouldn't just flippantly run around treating the name of God without a lack of respect in some sense. But God is not a superstitious God, so we're not going to get in trouble for saying Yahweh or to teach it or to make a point. All right, so here's the other thing. That was just the quick on the Hebrew grammar. The other thing that I wanted to go over was I wanted to look at Matthew here, and we walked through Matthew, but maybe we didn't quite explain some of that. Because the question with Matthew is, but none of that stuff happened. And the point that we were trying to make yesterday was simply this. So Jesus walks away from the Pharisees and the scribes and the teachers of the law after he had just said 7 times, "Woe to you, scribes! Woe to you, Pharisees! You teachers of the law! You don't give God what he wants, yet you come after these poor people for the tiniest grain of their spice to make sure that they're giving the full 10% of it. You are horrible to widows. You are a brood of vipers." And he's saying, woe to you. And, in the Greek, that's kind of this onomatopoeia kind of, kind of phrase at them. That the word itself kind of carries this rah sound. And he's angry and he's frustrated or upset with them. And so he calls down these 7 woes, which are kind of like 7 curses in some sense. So the next passage, he goes up with his disciples and sits privately with them on the Mount of Olives. And, they say, "Tell us, when will all these woes happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" And one of the things we need to be clear about is end of the age is end of an era. So when we see end of the age, don't think end of time. Okay, the end of the age would be the end of when the temple was destroyed and all the things, because he just said the temple, all the woe to all of you. Well, what is going to be the sign of the new era, the era of the Messiah? When will that happen? And so then he says that nations will rise against nations, and all these, you'll be handed over and persecuted. We see this happen in Acts throughout. You'll be hated by the nations, all the people around, because of him. And they were. The Jews would follow him from town to town and get them persecuted. And at that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other, and many false prophets will appear and deceive many. And this is true. And throughout Acts and throughout books that are non-biblical that record this time of history, we see many people standing up trying to say, hey, I'm Messiah, or hey, I'm a prophet, and it never goes well for them. And typically they're wiped out, and they and all their followers are wiped out. And so, but because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. And here's another point. When we read our Bibles, when you run across the word saved, that doesn't always mean salvation. Like, we have to be able to use words in common ways if we're reading literature. So if the word saved always means salvation, well then I guess that file on my computer, I'm going to see it in heaven because I saved it. It has salvation. All of the various elements and things, then every time we say, oh, I saved that sandwich for tomorrow, I'll see it in heaven, it's got salvation. So he's talking about being saved from the coming wrath that he just called down upon Jerusalem. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who murder the prophets, right? How long have I wanted to gather you like a hen gathers his chicks under his wings? And hens gather chicks under wings for protection. That's not a love metaphor. That's a protection metaphor, to protect them from oncoming trouble. And, Jesus is saying, the judgment is coming here, and I've always wanted to protect you from it, but you're blowing it. And he's speaking specifically to the leaders, not to the everyman. Remember, the everyman with the palm branches on Palm Sunday, gathered from all the surrounding areas. Jesus was widely loved by the masses. The populous people loved him. But the people in Jerusalem running the city, it was a brood of vipers and a den of thieves, and it was a corrupt city at this time, and he's calling judgment upon them. All right. And this gospel will be preached to all the nations. This is another one we probably should have gone over yesterday, but the word nations here is not actually nations. That word in 14 is the word oikumene. And without getting too deep in the scholar stuff, oikumene, and let's just think about words and how words are used. Oikumene is the same word that's used in Luke. And let's look at this in Luke 2:1. And you thought you guys were going to get an easy show on a Friday, but I've turned the you're trying to get a sip from a fire hose right now, so bear with me because I just want to clear some of these up. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire oikumene. It doesn't say Roman world in the Greek, it says oikumene, and we infer and translate Roman world. That's the same thing over here. It's the word oikumene. It doesn't mean the entire globe, it means the region. Okay? So nations is actually a decent translation. And this is what we see in Acts, that the gospel was preached. And it goes on and on and on with all of these things. And the point is that when we get down here to some of the harder metaphors, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. The reason we looked at Isaiah yesterday in Isaiah 19, and you see this in Isaiah 13, and you see it in many other Old Testament books, that the idea of sun, moon, and stars is a way to refer to nations and rulers and authorities and power structures. So when Jesus says the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light and the stars will fall from the sky, we have some questions here. Do we agree about what they're saying? do we agree about what that means? And do we agree with them about what it means? So who gets to determine what these authors meant? Is it us or is it them, right? So the question we ask is not, what is the key that unlocks the passage? We ask, how was the language used? How did people of their era use this language? And that's why we went back to Genesis 37 with Joseph's dream, and he says to his father and his 11 brothers, I saw the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowing down to me. And they all know what that means. That means they're going to bow down to Joseph. So in the same sense, when we see sun, moon, and stars, we need to think about how they use those phrases. That's why I brought up "in a minute" yesterday, because that's a popular kind of phrase in our day. In a minute. I haven't done that in a minute. It doesn't literally mean a minute. So we need to understand, what did they mean by these words? So here's kind of what we missed in that. The sun, moon, and stars, that's Israel. That's Jerusalem, Israel, that's what's in focus. And all the peoples of the earth, which all the nations of the land, it's gay, it's not cosmos. It's not a reference to the whole globe. It's gay. It's a reference to the dirt, actually. And so, like a handful of earth, I pick up a handful of earth, or so it's land would be a better translation, right? All the peoples of the land, the region that I'm in, will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds with great power and glory. And that's why we went to Isaiah 19, because this is divine judgment language. Then in Isaiah 19, Isaiah records that, God will come on a cloud and judge Egypt. Well, God didn't literally come on a cloud. He brought armies against Egypt. And I want to say it was Assyria he brought against Egypt at that time, but you'll have to go back and check. I often get proper nouns confused. But he brought judgment against Egypt. And he used that language, coming on the clouds, to talk about the judgment he would bring through a foreign army. So if that's what's in view, if this is talking about the power structures of Israel and the Son of Man coming on a cloud with great glory, and then he comes back and says, this generation will not pass away. Well, he's saying this in about 30 AD. So if he's saying that in about 30 AD somewhere, well, what's a generation? It's about 40 years to them. Then we need to look out about 40 years and see, did anything like that happen? Did an army come against Israel and wipe them out? Did he destroy their power structures? And did the people mourn because of this judgment? And is Jesus, and so Jesus is attributing the judgment of foreign armies coming against a nation as an act of God. And when we read about the Roman-Jewish War from 66 to 70 AD and the temple's destruction in 70 AD, not only was it horrific, one of the worst conflicts in history, really, even by today's standards, it was a horrific conflict. Just terrible. And so did these things happen? I would say yes, these things happened. They happened when Rome came against Israel and wiped Israel out. Now, I'm sorry if that was a lot of replay for some of you, but it occurred to me after yesterday's podcast that, man, maybe I was just moved a little too fast and I didn't get that point across. The point is that we have to first, before we start saying sun, moon, and stars, well, I didn't see the sun, moon, and stars go out in a literal sense. First, we have to ask ourselves, well, is that what they meant by that language? What did they mean by that language? That's why it's important for us to catch a turn of phrase. That's why it's important on complicated passages for us to go back and say, well, wait, what word are you using? In 14, what are you saying when you say the gospel of the kingdom will be preached to the whole world? No, it's to the whole oikumene. It will be preached to the whole region. The same word is in Luke 2:1. That Caesar didn't, there's not a census. Caesar didn't send a census to the Mayans or the Aztecs in Luke 2:1 that caused Joseph and Mary to go back to Bethlehem. Instead, Caesar sent a census to the whole world, meaning the whole region that he had rule over. And that's that word oikumene. It's different than cosmos. And that's the word that's being used here in Matthew 24:14, that it's the whole region that is in view here, not the whole world. And when we mistranslate that, then we tend to shift what's being said. And this was our big point yesterday. If we start with our theology and we say, okay, I've got this like premillennial theology. I need Matthew 24 to be something in the future. I need it to be already but not yet. Then I'm probably going to miss what's actually being said, because I've got a filter and then I'm going in to read grammar from my filter. And I want to get my filter out of the way and then just go in and read for what it says, right? So the point is that we don't assume meaning until we learn all of the ways that they're speaking. And when we run across these phrases, instead of just assuming, well, oh, I know what sun, moon, and stars means, that this is something that a friend of mine said to me one time, the Bible was written to them, not to us. And that's well said. And I've ripped it off ever since, because it's written for us, but to them. And so their language, they're having a conversation like we're listening to one half of a telephone call. And what we want to do is understand their turn of phrase and what was going on in history. And then for the New Testament, in terms of terminology, we need to be looking at the Old Testament, not for like a lock and key we're like putting Legos and we're doing the national treasure thing. And, we've got lemon juice on our Bible with a blow dryer, we're trying to figure out the code. What we really want to do is say, how was language used? And once we understand how language was used, now we can go back and understand it. So how did these turn of phrase, how did this work for them? And how did they speak? And that's difficult sometimes. It's not a thing of intellect, it's a thing of culture, right? Look at the history that you do with your Bible and trying to lean into those ancient discussions. Look at those things as a journey of culture, not of scholarship, right? Just like if I was going to go to Italy, I would need to learn how they use phrases. If you don't know, in Bocca al Lupo is how they say good luck, but it literally means in the mouth of the wolf. And I forget what they say, something al lupo back. They say, may the wolf fail, basically. And so just like break a leg, for us, doesn't literally mean break a leg. It means, hey, have a good performance. So all of these kind of idioms and turns of phrases, and we need to realize that our New Testament was written in Old Testament culture, right? So we read the Old Testament and the intertestamental period writings, and that's the culture of the language that they're going to use. All right, so I hope that was clear as mud, because I knew you guys wanted Matthew 24 twice. If you guys are interested at any point, a lot of this doubles into the kind of language that was used in Revelation. And I can recommend a couple of books here. One of them is an easier read by Leon Morris. It's called Apocalyptic. It's a few hundred pages, and you can knock it out in a weekend. That's good. A better one that you're not going to knock out in a weekend, it might take you a month or two to really get through it with some serious effort, is D.S. Russell, The Method and Message of Jewish Apocalyptic. And that's a survey of the literary type, and it helps us understand how words were used. It doesn't tell us what Ezekiel meant or what Revelation meant. It tells us how was this language used and how were they communicating with it, so that we can go back in and have a better chance at understanding what these cultures are saying. So I hope that's clear as mud. And, you can always... We had a teacher, a science teacher. I had him for driver's ed. Man, he was great. And he loved sailing. And so if you could ask if you'd had him for physics, or if you had him for chemistry, or even for driver's ed, if you could somehow relate your question to sailing, you could get the rest of the day to be sailing stories, and he would forget to give you your homework, and he would forget to give you the lesson and the assignment. So the trick in his class was always, how do I ask a question that has something to do with sailing so that we can get Mr. Carter to talk about sailing all day and skip our homework? And so with me, How do I get Bob to talk about Matthew 24 so I don't have to hear anything else? That's my thing. All right. Or the Revelation. That's another good one. So what I've got for you today, the whole point, just watch words and phrases. Let's first pick up the words and phrases before we try and interpret what they mean. Once we do that and we catch the turn of phrase, now we can start to wrestle with meaning. And that's going to require us sometimes to get past our English translation and to look at what people say in the original language. All right, it's Bright Spots Friday, so we're going to have some bright spots. And I want to move on to this video that I haven't quite queued up. So while I queue this up, you guys haven't met our Be Right Back Squirrel, and I need to introduce you guys to the Be Right Back Squirrel. He needs a name. Why don't you guys help me come up with a name, and I will be back in like 15 seconds. Yeah, we need a name for this squirrel. Chuck? Well, we already have Chuck does our intro. So name him after Chuck? Well, that's Charles Spurgeon. Maybe can we find a nutty name for him? All right, we can get off the squirrel. I think I'm here. We'll see if we can get this going. And now we're back from outer space. All right. Well, now, thank you both for staying with us. Look, I wanted to move on, and I wanted to talk about this dude. And you may have heard this dude. His name is Warren Smith. And I can't remember if I've used him before. Oh, yeah, he was in a thing with Peter Boghossian. He's a secret scholar guy, is his YouTube channel. And basically, his thing is logic and logical flaws. And so he wants to check logic and logical flaws in thinking and reasoning. And so he's not as concerned with conclusions. So I thought he was great because he's a great example of how we can listen without the insecurity. How can we listen to each other without just letting the whole thing blow up? And so I want to play a couple of moments from this. They do a bunch of intros and they introduce who they are. And who we're looking at here on the screen right now is the professor at Penn State of a Sociology 119. And that's posted on their channel. And this is his wife, who is just in for the day. And she's also into sociology, and they talk about that. And, she helps him prepare and all the things. And then Warren got an intro about his channel, how he lost a job, and it just kind of turned into a thing for him. And so I want to bump ahead here and listen to a little bit about, part of it is just a soft-spoken kind of meek dude. One of the things they pull up this chart here about, it's this Pew Research chart from a few years ago, which talks about, how many people get their news from online. And it's like something like 53% or something of people between 18 and 29, their primary source of news is online, like social media, influencers, people like that. And then 20% of those tend to be right-leaning. And that's not a conspiracy thing. If we think about that practically, if conservatives listen to regular news outlets and say, yeah, that's not what I think, well, then they're going to find a different avenue, right? If I dam up the water, it's going to find a different way around eventually. And so that's kind of why that space is is led and run by a lot of conservative voices. One of the biggest grievances of conservatives is in the 2020 election when like 2% of the vote from Arizona had come in, and Fox News says, and that's it. It looks like Biden won Arizona. And they're like, what? So whatever you think about the election, that one just torqued off a lot of conservatives, and they're like, I'm done with Fox. So a lot of online, that really drives people to an online space. But I want to listen to maybe a couple of bits here. And let's make sure we can hear him. We'll hear you'll hear the producer if he pipes up as well, because we've got the
I'm
same.
more interested in the dynamics of the moves being made and how people are thinking and wielding logic and the techniques being implemented in these conflicts, these verbal conflicts in a way, which echoes to all aspects of your life, whether it's business, negotiations, anything. But we're seeing.
Yeah, so you see that. So how is the logic? And when you watch his videos, he does these like 10-minute shorts or clips where he kind of goes back and forth between the conversation, and he's not really pointing out who's right. He's pointing out whether or not something was a reasonable, logical flow or position to have. So very interesting. But he's often commenting on other people because that's kind of the thing. So I want to jump ahead here a little bit and let's see if I can actually get this going here, to another moment where there's a question.
Do you have a comment, bro? Question?
Sorry, yeah. You said that you value autonomy in your thought, but all you really do in your videos, which you post nearly every day, is react to Joe Rogan podcasts, which doesn't really sound like individual thoughts to me. So can you comment on that?
That's a challenge.
Yeah, no. If we were to look
for
at
you.
it, now and then I will cover a Joe Rogan interaction. The last one was Joe Rogan and Elon Musk. It might be, if we were to actually go through the numbers, it's probably more accurate, like maybe twice a month. If there were more interesting exchanges, I would definitely delve into it. I don't know what I'm going to cover tomorrow. There's interesting moves being made here. It might be on Joe Rogan, it might not be. But you what was the second part of that? You said, so I don't have full autonomy.
So you see how he answered that? He can go, well, I don't cover Joe Rogan all the time. He just says what's true, and he's not bothered. He's not offended. He's not shaken up by it. Imagine if that's a conversation about Jesus, and that's how we responded. How cool would that be if that's kind of how we were known to reply? So great humility from him. So let's let him go on, and he's like, well, I'm going to clarify this second part of the question. So can you give that to me again, because I don't want to misunderstand what you're saying. Later on, we're going to hear him talk about not strawmanning people as well.
Because I'm covering Joe Rogan too much?
Well, you create your own content, but you don't really give your own thought, at least from what I've seen. I mean, granted, I only watched a few minutes out of each of your videos while I've been sitting here, but I have gone through a year or so through the videos, and I've seen the titles of them. You don't necessarily give your own thought. You don't really comment on anything that's of substance that other people haven't mentioned themselves. So I don't.
That's fair. That's
I don't
fair.
really consider you an influencer, but really a commentator.
I would like to not think of myself as an influencer either.
Call himself an influencer either.
No, but if you look at, because I try, and when I'm watching these dynamics,
Yeah. So again, he's not offended, right? He's not like, well, you didn't watch all my whole catalog, or well, I say unique things. He's not worried about himself. He's just letting the person comment on what that other person's comment and their perspective is. If you watch his channel, he's a lot like that. He's really trying to create peaceful conversation. So
I'm trying to identify the moves.
Can I just ask you to back up can you just say what you're doing? Because not every.
Well, and hold on real quick, because I appreciate that they're running a class, but that's not going to work for my podcast. I need you to take a pause on the class and give me the content I can use. I'm just playing. Yeah, it's a really interesting class. If you're into that kind of thing, it's an interesting thing to watch. But I want to jump ahead a little bit to where he kind of hits some of the same thing. So this is another question from someone.
How do you think it's beneficial for the student? It may be beneficial for you to have that bolded title and for you to have that kind of hook grabber, but people are going to see that and associate it with a college course that they're not in, and then watch parts of the video or all of the video and then lean on your title for the content of your video. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I hope that they lean on what they're actually seeing in the video, and I am condensing. We're taking an hour and a half class, and I'm taking what I think is most interesting and important and condensing that in my perspective down to 10 minutes. And this is a fair criticism that I'm going to always get, because there is so much left out, and people have a proclivity to say, but I had this brilliant point that you left out. And my guideline is, as long as I'm not deceptively editing something and then misrepresenting what you're saying, I think I can condense and
So, he gets into why he does the titles, but again, he's like, look, my whole point, I'm just trying to represent you fairly. And I want to jump ahead here. Well, actually, it's coming right up next in the next 10 seconds. So let's just plow through it here. Look at what he says in response to this. So he says, well, this is what my goal is. And then look at how he replies to that.
accurately represent the logic to actually make it more digestible without misrepresenting. As long as I'm staying on that, and I might get it wrong now and then, but that's what I'm striving to do. Now, you had an interesting point about if I'm in the classroom. This is the first time I've been back in the classroom in this setting in a while. So, and it's very different when I'm in the classroom, right? You're in teacher mode, where it's not about what I think, my personal views. It's about, these are the arguments, and we're going to navigate the perspectives and the logic. Now when I'm sitting down and I'm firing something off, and when I started doing this, it was like, you never think people are going to see the people in the video. Like, I did a video about Tim Pool, never thinking Tim Pool would see it.
Yeah, and then Tim Pool content nukes him. So, that's sometimes the thing when you comment on some of these people, and if you have an audience and they catch you, then and they see it and they don't like what you said, then they'll bring their big audience to bear against you and just nuke you. So I think we can handle one more here really quick. If this is the clip, I think it is. If not, we'll move on. And apologies for the technical failures this morning, but that's what makes it so authentic. You're here running the podcast with us, because you needed another job.
What Lori just asked.
I had a separate question, but I can also answer your question if you want. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, just how often do you find yourself saying, is this fake news? Some version of that, or how you discern what is fake
skip
news.
ahead from the fake news thing here.
Yeah.
I had a question for Warren. I kind of wanted to question your credibility. Why should someone even spend the time watching your videos? Why should someone follow you? Why should somebody want to hear your opinion on videos that you review?
Oh my God, that is such a good question.
And I've never seen your videos personally,
Yeah.
but I'm just learning about you for the first time now, and I'm thinking okay, why should I want to hear your opinion in the first place?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't tell you why you should, honestly.
Yeah.
I can't answer that.
Okay.
That's such
It's
a
been a
good
surprise
question.
to me. It's a good question. It's one I contemplate every day.
What?
I think about it for myself.
Yeah, so you can kind of hear where he's going and hear his humility. He's not saying, hey, look at me, I'm doing this, I'm trying to be an influencer. For him, it's just the love of the craft. It's, hey, I just care about kind of logical arguments, and are we being really honest in our arguments in the positions we take, or are we using tricks and games and wordplay and things to try and get ahead and dunk on each other? And that's one of the reasons that I found his channel, because that's kind of what I'm about in a Christian way. In terms of, we're following Jesus, I'm just trying to have conversations. And so I don't need to be right about Matthew 24. I just want to know what Matthew was saying. And I'm not going to start from the theology and go backwards. I'm going to start from the grammar and the literature. And that's the same with everything else. But I love the fact that it's well, why should I watch or listen? I don't, I mean, one of the things I ripped off from another preacher that I say to my own congregation is, look, don't follow me, because the closer you look at my life, the more disappointed you're going to be. Follow Jesus, and I hope that you see Jesus in me. But, I don't need to be right, and I want to kind of crucify that within myself all the time. And so this goes back to, okay, well, why this? Why this on Bright Spots Friday? Because I think that this is a place where Warren, I don't know if he follows Jesus or not. I've never heard him say one thing to either side of that issue. But this is a place where I think he's got it right. And this is a place where we can see a little bit of the Imago Dei in someone else, a little bit of the humility. And if that was our take in Christianity, when someone says, yeah, but why do you think this theology? You're like, well, I mean, I think that's what it says. Do you want to go back and look at it? Let's just go look and see if that's what the grammar says. Because I'm confident in God, and I'm confident that, his hand was on these scriptures. And so I'm confident that if I'm just going to read them for what his messengers intended to write, right? So for what Matthew meant to say, God said, Matthew, you go and send, and through the Spirit and providence, Matthew's whole life was shaped in such a way that he would produce that gospel. And then I want to sit and listen to that gospel as if I was in the first audience and understand what Matthew was saying and not be dismissive of the messenger that God chose to send his message. And so then when I listen to him and I understand him, I think that's what I'm getting in terms of the truth that God wants me to consider about my God and my Savior, and the person of Jesus. So when we see these moments in our society, that's what we talk about when we're talking about a bright spot. The bright spot is not our technology today, but the bright spot is this idea that God doesn't need us to run around and be debate winners all the time. It's fine to do debates, and that there's some utility in that. There's some productivity in having a friendly debate where you're going to debate honestly and have formal rules and things like that. And that's fine. And these conversations are fine. But on a life-to-life level, the Bible's not a weapon, and we don't need to stand between an accuser and the Bible and defend the Bible for what it says. We just need to be students of it and also then live with the risen Savior that we follow with every day. So think about Philippians chapter 4, and maybe that can be our focus this week. And here's my challenge for you. This is the one thing I'm going to say before we wrap up the show, that it'll be the one thing of the 3 or 4 things that I say before we wrap up the show. Because, all right, the algorithm challenge this week. One of the things that I've done recently is that I've kind of shifted my focus on the interwebs. I set up this channel here. I set up some bookmarks in my Twitter or X account, and I just bookmark good things. And I created a folder called Good Things, and it's just a bunch of good things. This guy gets a baseball, and then he turns around and hands it to the little girl who was racing over to get the baseball. He doesn't even flinch. He's like, okay, that's cool. This is a girl with cancer, and she's singing, "My God is so big, so strong, and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do." Here's a story of someone who would pray, but a soldier who would pray before every time they'd go out, and it bugged everyone else, and so they took her off the routes, and then they started getting hit, and so they asked her to come back. When we fill our life with good things come from God. And so we need to be able to truly identify good things. A teacher who gives someone a cap and gown who can't afford it, and the kid just starts crying. A lot of these moments, people think a police officer breaking into a house to rescue a family. A little dude who puts Jesus, a lineman who puts Jesus figures everywhere where he's working for the next lineman who comes across to find. Just cool things. There's great things. When we shift our focus to the good things, Every good and perfect thing comes from God. And I'm not saying kindness, pass it on. I'm saying that God is at work in the world. And, this is my Father's world. Oh, let me never forget that though the wrong seems oft so strong, God is the ruler yet. And the idea is that God wins. And his kingdom is expanding throughout the world. And heaven is breaking through. And sometimes we get the wrong focus. Jesus is giving us all these bright spots and bright moments right around us in the lives of ourselves and others. And we just keep running around turning the lights off like you need to save electricity in the kingdom of heaven or something. And that's not where it's at. Whatever is good, whatever is noble, whatever is praiseworthy, whatever is honorable, if anything is just or good, go read Philippians chapter 4. That's what he's talking about. That God is at work doing those good things. So here's my algorithm challenge for you for the week. It's not that, you can still tune in and watch the news and stuff, but for likes, for bookmarks, and for engagement and for comments, limit that to wins. Is this a win somehow? Did God win? Is this a good thing? Or is this personal stuff with friends and family? Because we're hit all the time, every day, with stuff that's so dark and so negative, but that's the lie covering over the truth that God is really at work. So try to like things that are good. And spend a week and just, they call it algorithm poisoning. When you've got all the computers tracking all of the things that you're doing, and when you actually just take a week and do something completely different, right? You're not into golf, but you watch a week of golf on your YouTube. It totally destroys the algorithm. So just destroy your algorithm this week. Poison your algorithm with a bunch of good things, and see what happens. Because God's going to win. That's the way it's going to be. Man, I don't want us to put our heads in the sand about what's going on in news and things like that, but always ask, whatever you see and whatever you're seeing, okay, but where is Jesus in all of this? And think about that temple destruction. The followers of Jesus are looking around and seeing the armies of Rome gathering around Jerusalem. They're going to destroy the city. And how do we escape? And then there's this moment where the armies pull back and they have to regather. And there's an opportunity. And the Christians escaped to Pella, and God was with them. And so we need to realize that in all of this, God is working and God is reshaping his world. All right? So I hope truly that you get to spend your weekend with people who love God and who love you, and at very least with people you love who love you, and that you see a lot of bright spots. God, this is your world. And I'm not going to live like you lose. I'm going to live like you win in the end. You are reshaping me, and you are reshaping this world. Help us see where you're working. Join you there to be a part of all the good things that come when we lay our lives down like your son, Jesus. Amen. Okay, so recap of the show. We went over Hebrews, or the Hebrew word for Lord and Yahweh and why you see it in small caps. We went over Matthew 24. If you have questions, please send me questions, because we can kind of walk through that really slowly and take each verse. I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to do blog posts. In yesterday's show, I gave some links to some information, a paper I wrote. So if you go back and look at the summary of that show, a paper I wrote on this generation. But the big point is, if Jesus says these things are going to happen in this generation, then they either did or Jesus is a liar. So when we don't get it, we have to rethink how we're understanding things. All right. I'm really grateful that you're here. I can't tell you how awesome it is to spend the week with you, and that I know that when I get out of bed at an hour before the angels wake up, that, you know, I'm doing it because there's going to be some people who care about our unity and are going to get away from this whole theological triage with each other, dismissing and dividing. And we're going to lean into this transformational life. Because really, and that's really why I want you to like, share, subscribe, and, you know, forward this to someone else, because what if we were known, you know, as the people who listen? How wonderful would it be if it was just the regular and common thing in our society for people who don't know Jesus to go, man, I'm struggling with something. You know who I know will listen without judging me and not try and save my soul, but just be with me and love me, maybe kind of the way God would. I'm going to go hang out with a Christian because I'm going to feel like I'm sitting in the presence of Jesus. That would just be so beautiful. And that happens when our agreement about who Jesus is increases, and that happens because we learn to be better listeners and understanders of each other. Understanders, that's a great word, right? All right, listen, it wouldn't be a podcast if I didn't give you the socials. On X, Take Up Your X. Facebook and Instagram are a Jesus Followers podcast. Rumble is a Jesus Follower, Rumble is Jesus Follower podcast. YouTube is Jesus Follower channel. Like, subscribe, share, leave comments. We will be following along with the chat and try and handle chats at the end of the show. So if we missed you, and we got to give a special badge of honor to Kipper from the chat yesterday, because you rock, dude. You're our first chat person. You get the chat. You get the crown for first live chat follower. So love you guys, man. And it truly is my hope that the light of Jesus would shine through you today and all weekend. We will see you Tuesday at 5 a.m. And have a wonderful weekend.
Yes, you now have a concert side table at the fabulous Blue Note, Madison near Dearborn, Chicago's Mecca for moderns, and for the people who play it that way. Currently, the Blue Note is featuring Count Basie, his famous piano, and his big new band. Yes, it's what you've been waiting for. It's Count Billy Basie, and here's the man himself.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Count Basie and the band. Sincerely, you're going to enjoy. We hope you enjoy our little program, because we're going to have fun working for you. Now, in our first number, we feature Joe Newman on trumpet, Eddie Lockjaw Davis on tenor. A little thing we call the Blee Blop Blues.